right, everyone. Welcome to Closing Corner today, hosted by our very own Kelly Evans. If you don't know her already, you will get to know her through today. Kelly is not only an agent with us, but she is a transaction coordinator. So she's helped hundreds of deals get to closing. We've started putting this on the calendar on a quarterly basis because she sees so many of them and has seen firsthand what it takes to get to closing successfully. She's also seen what can happen if that doesn't happen and what we can do to avoid it. So today we're going to talk about how to provide proactive communication, some documents that can help provide a peace of mind to everyone involved, and any tips and tricks that are needed to help make things go smoothly for both you and your clients alike. So bring your questions. We like this to be a very interactive session. If you have any questions, feel free to do a hand raise icon or pop them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on everything. We've got some slides today so that everyone can follow along. And then as always, when this recording goes out, we'll make sure to provide any resources to you. But thank you for joining us today. And Kelly, thank you for sharing your expertise. We're excited to learn from you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So yeah, thanks for joining today. I'm going to just jump right in. As Kate mentioned, we may try to do this every quarter. I appreciate this platform. I have a unique perspective in that I have the privilege of participating in multiple transactions. I get to see a lot of unique things. We don't know what we don't know until we learn it. As long as I've been doing this, every transaction is still really different. Every transaction brings something that even sometimes I didn't see coming. I promise you the toughest transactions will just make you better at your job. You'll always come out the other end knowing something, and you'll be better and set better expectations for your clients for the next transaction. So I hope we address something that's timely or happening in the market. Jump in, use the chat, keep it casual. I did do sort of a, just a little bit of a bullet point to go over. But first, we will talk about choice partners. I got a lot of input from this session from Allie. I got, the lender perspective on what happens with closing delays and extensions and possession. Kara Gibbons, of course, helped me with a conversation about 2 weeks ago. I have her input. While we're talking about possession, we're also going to talk about renter's insurance. I had great conversation with Brad Davis, super helpful. And then just a quick side note, I've used every one of these other vendors this week. I needed Lisa for home warranty yesterday. We schedule Capital Comfort for HVAC inspections all the time. So this also just my personal shout out that I also have great experience using all of these vendors. So are you guys experiencing closing delays? I had a shocking amount of closing delays last month. I've noticed a buying and selling trend again at the same time, which can sometimes lead to delays, need for extension, need for possession. So we can talk about what leads to delays and what are alternatives. I can see the chat on my other screen over here. So if anybody puts anything in there, I will definitely try to go over and make sure I see it. So we'll just talk about 7-day extensions, closing delays, buyer possession before closing, seller possession after closing, a little blurb on renter's insurance. And then with this buy-sell trend, sometimes buyers moving from out of state can't be here for closing, and we can talk about POAs and mail-away closings. And again, I had a lot of contribution from Kara and Allie, so we could add in the attorney and lender perspective. These are some delay scenarios. Could be a loan delay. It does happen. Could be a seller situation. It could be the seller causing the closing delay. It could be a mortgage payoff situation, which I've seen quite a lot last month. Could be clear title. It could be the attorney is working through some situations in order to get clear title for the property. We had one with an FHA repair that was not going to be fixed, and they needed to change loan types. That caused a delay. It could be just logistics. It may not be that someone can't close. It could just be logistics of vacating. Moving van couldn't be there in time. Buyers may delay because they do their walkthrough and they're not happy with repairs or personal property that's been left behind. And sadly, the best leverage that you can have is saying, I'm not closing until you fix these things. That's when the 7 days is useful. And then buyers couldn't be here from out of state, and maybe they needed to do a mail away or a POA, and um, mail away will cause a delay unless you work it the correct way. So I hope we can get to mail away closings. I'll just do a quick blurb on how those work if you've never done one before. So the 7-day extension, it is written in our offer to purchase. I I personally have gotten in the habit of letting clients know this from the beginning of going under a contract. Now, you may not want to mention that to your client. It could be a client that just can't handle anything else. I think it should be encouraged to just mention my welcome letter says, although not ideal, it is worth mentioning that either party is allowed to extend for 7 days if there is a need. Now, the need is open to interpretation. Um, but there's no charge. There's no charge for either party for this inconvenience. We can try, depending on how the transaction's gone, maybe you can get a little bit of money or something for the from the other party that's causing the delay, but it's not required, and it's hard to win that argument. So there are costs. So when someone extends closing, there are costs. It could affect the buyer's loan lock. It could be a seller's purchase. So if the buyer can't close, it could be affecting that seller, unable to make their purchase. Just rescheduling movers could cost money. Um, Connecting your utilities or reconnecting your utilities, missing work to attend closing. You have a closing day in mind and the other party delays, and now you have to rework. Taking time off to attend closing. We forget our flexibility as realtors. There are people who have jobs that they it's really difficult to get the time off to sit at a closing table for an hour. It's just logistics sometimes. So I also mention this because I don't know if anyone uses this document. This came out last year. It's Form 170 and it's closing guidelines for sellers. And it can be a really good form to use for your sellers. But a lot of times we don't share it until, maybe after due diligence or closer to closing date. But the very first bullet point on here says closing may be delayed up to 7 days. And we don't want this to be the first time a seller knows that there could be a 7-day delay. The sooner we know about a 7-day extension, the better, especially if it was their plan all along. I think there was a Facebook post recently that Jen DeCourcy posted, and it said right out of the gate, when the buyers went to schedule with the attorney, they added on their 7 days. It stings, but better to know then than the week of closing. And I spoke to Kara and I asked her, is this 7-day extension an argument we can win? And she said it's difficult. It can be difficult to win the 7-day argument. Most likely, you're probably going to have to allow it, and there probably won't be any compensation for the delay. And it's hard to prove what qualifies as not possible to close. Um, and then the attorney mentioned to me that she just had a closing scheduled, and right out of the gate, they added on the 2 days. But I will say, I had this situation recently where offer to purchase was done, closing date was chosen, and then honest to goodness, buyers sometimes really don't know that they need to be there for closing. What you got, Brian? Oh, you're on mute.
You can finish your thought. I
Are you
just
sure?
was yeah, whenever you get to me. Yeah.
Okay. Um, that buyers sometimes don't know they need to attend closing. They've e-signed everything up to that point. They have e-signed your documents, your buyer agency documents. They've e-signed everything for the lender. And sometimes it's an assumption that we think they know they need to physically be in an office at a table with a pen signing for closing. And sometimes no one remembers to have that conversation. So what happened was when I really sent my welcome letter and said, just here's closing date, please plan to be present for up to an hour. Make sure you have a unexpired driver's license. Um, and the buyer wrote back and said, "Well, I'm a nurse. I work 12-hour shifts these 3 days. I can't do it that day." So immediately we had to fix the closing date so that she could be present. So sometimes it's just logistic. It's not meant to be malicious. It's not, sometimes it's just for something along those lines. Yes, Brian?
Yeah, so I just want to circle back in case anybody had a kind of a similar question, just like on Jen DeCourcy's situation. So the reason why it's important that we are just conveying like what we know to be true about the contract and being careful we don't cross into like the legal boundary is because like there's an element of what's called good faith in order for a contract to be binding. So the parties have to enter into the contract in good faith. And like in Jim DeCourcy's situation, that buyer was not entering into the terms of that contract in good faith. They had tried to negotiate a more delayed closing. Seller wouldn't budge. So they agreed to the earlier closing and then just said, I'm going to dip into the 7 days. Well, that they didn't enter in good faith. And so if we were to tell that our client, hey, really nothing you can do about it, like, yeah, it's crappy they're doing it, but really nothing you can do, that may or may not be true. If your client was really upset about it and was like, what are my options here? We got to get them to an attorney because maybe there is an option. Like maybe they are so hell bent on not working with these people now that they want to pursue a breach of contract, or that contract was never actually formed because it wasn't entered into in good faith. Those are things that are way beyond us that people go to law school for 6 years to be able to opine on. Anyway, point being, like sometimes it just gets into an area where like our job is not to interpret this stuff. I can tell you what the contract says, and if you want to do something beyond that, boop, go talk to an attorney.
Did you have a question too, Kate, or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in along these lines. I'm sure all of us are kind of aware, but just a friendly reminder, exactly what you were saying about being present to sign. We take that for granted. We know that to be true. And so the more we can prepare our clients, anytime I had a buyer that was out of state where I'm doing video tours for them, or maybe it's someone I've worked with a few times and they purchased in person before, and so they really trust us, right? Like if we know they are out of state clients, making sure that we have this conversation even before they go under contract, ideally, when we're doing another buyer consultation or as we're showing homes, just reminding them like, hey, just so you know, so it's super clear, we will need you to be present for closing. And if you can't be, here are our options. We can do a mail away. That gets a little tricky because the lender and the attorney have to mail that paperwork to you. And sometimes numbers aren't finalized until a day or two before closing. You will need to make sure you still sign it in front of a notary. Sometimes they allow a family member to sign for you, but it's normally a direct family member. It's not normally a friend. And so we need to make sure if someone else is signing on your behalf that it's someone that the lender approves, which means we need some time to organize it. I, as your agent, as much as we love our relationship with you, I won't be able to sign for you. And it's not something you can sign electronically. So knowing what those options are, I think is really important, and sharing that with your client, like you said, just as soon as possible, just helps make it easier because no one wants to buy a plane ticket the week before and they might not be able to. So just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I'm glad you did, because it's funny how we assume they know they need to be here and we forget to tell them. Also, while I had Kara last week when we were talking about this, and while I have this platform, she wanted me to mention a couple other things. Right now, she has noticed, and again, this could lend to the 7 days or just, a need for some of that time. She feels like lenders' closing departments are a little understaffed right now with this recent uptick. And it's caused some delays in CD balancing and slower loan packages. She's had situations where the loan, the buyers show up to closing or about to show up to closing, the loan package isn't there yet. They have to push closing till maybe 2, 3, 4 o'clock to sign on that day because that's very important, and we will talk about that. But then it doesn't record until the next day. So sometimes that's when that 7 days is useful. But she just wanted to mention that maybe setting expectations for your clients that they probably may not be able to review figures until day before closing. Not movement, of course. Movement, we've no issues. But that is Kara's unique perspective, dealing with a lot of lenders and a lot of closing departments. And the closing department for lenders are not usually our friendly loan processor that we've been dealing with. It's a completely different department. And just also, she wanted me to mention that cash closings are not quick closings. They still have to do the title search. They still have to transfer HOA. And it's best if you could maybe just set the expectation that 3 weeks is still necessary, even when it's cash. So of course, Kara is going to help you any way she can. But while we had this moment, we thought we would just throw this out there. And then lastly, the best way to help your attorney with on-time closings is to turn in your intake sheets as soon as possible. Any questions?
Let me just say, as an agent, the two things that filling out attorney intake forms was one of my least favorite things to do. And so that it would be easy for that to get pushed off. So this would be just a plug for you, Kelly, as like, this is one of the reasons to have a TC is because they thrive on that and they will get those things done and submitted quickly. Whereas we might push it to the back burner and then it's like 2 weeks before closing, a week before closing, and the attorney's like, what are we doing here? So
I know. Is Allie on the call?
I'm
She
here.
was. Okay, good. Perfect. Well, you're welcome to take over this piece, if you'd like.
Perfect. Well, hey, everybody. I love what Kara said, by the way. Yeah, so I mean, I guess the biggest thing with the delays is to keep it, to know the rate locks. Obviously, you as agents don't necessarily know when the rate's going to expire. The borrower doesn't even usually know that, honestly. So really, it's just important up front to tell us as the lenders immediately when and if there even is a potential for a delay, so we can go ahead and get that extension processed if necessary. There is a cost to that. As you can see, it kind of gives you an example of what that looks like on the screen there. It's really based on the loan amount. And as far as the cost goes, 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to like try to just cover it on my end. Every lender is not the same though. It really just depends on how much margin they have to cover it or not. I just think it's just easier to just deal with on our back end than figure out whose fault is it and who should put up the cost of that and whatnot. So that's kind of where that lies. I mean, the amount it is, like I said, is based on the loan amount. If it changes as well and the rate lock's not even an issue, the other thing was just things that need to be sensitive as far as the timing goes. As far as like 10-day VOE, we have to get a verification of employment within 10 days of the closing date. So we might have to redo that if it's close, like to the last minute kind of delay, or changing the effective date on the homeowner's insurance. And then the interim interest, especially if you move from like the end of the month to the beginning of the month, could change drastically as far as the assets go. So just things that like, just, back end things that nobody usually is aware of unless you are a lender, that kind of just has to be, more things have to be done. And so like the earlier we know about it, the better is all that comes down to, really.
I have a quick question for you, Allie, on the topic of someone potentially covering that cost, especially if it's the seller.
Yeah.
Is that something that would then need to also be run through and approved by the lender? Like, could that additional credit then cause a further delay in closing because the lender has to like resubmit that to underwriting?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect question. And it definitely would obviously entail a new document to show the new or revised seller credit. So we'd have to get that document all signed and into the loan file. And then the underwriter does have to go back and sign off on it. Thankfully, that's a really quick sign off, and the underwriter usually doesn't delay that. So that's usually super quick as far as movement goes. But yes, so that's definitely something to consider. That's why, honestly, most of the time, 99% of the time, I'll just cover and keep things moving along. Cause it's just, there's a lot of things that go along with every little change, so.
Cindy, what's your question?
Hey, I'm actually going through this today. Their lock ends today, but it's been a crazy whole closing situation. But my buyers wanted to put in a tankless water heater. And so the builder did that for them, obviously brand new construction. They did that for them, and they wanted to roll in the cost to the loan. It was $3,300. So we upped the price to have that done. But that amendment was not signed by the time of the appraisal because the builder was on vacation. But anyway, so she had the original contract, and so it appraised at the original price. We had it reviewed and it would not go up. But anyway, so that's why we're doing all this stuff last minute. So back to the original price for closing, which is today, which is also they're up in Ohio. So I had to deal with all that, and now they have to wire. Or no, they can't wire because it wasn't on the CD. The lender didn't want it on the CD. And now they are writing a check for overnight delivery for this hot water tank. And the seller is saying, do not record until we receive this check. Fine. But we should be able to close today, right? And recording should not make a difference on their loan lock, right?
Allie, do you want to answer that?
So the lock, do you know when the lock expires?
I think it expires today.
Okay, so if it expires today and if it's funded, it's good. If it,
Okay, yeah.
so if it's
They
recording,
wired all their money.
yes, so it should be fine. I
Okay.
mean, you can't, I mean, I'd rather be safe than sorry and talk to that specific lender to ensure that all,
Okay.
you know, is good, but I would assume that the lender would be well aware of that if that's the case.
Right. Yeah, this all came to fruition right before this meeting, so I'm calling her after
Sounds
this.
super fun.
Thank you.
Good questions, guys. Thank you. Yeah, my understanding is, as long as, they sign today, they sign on their loan date, which is the date that's on that Alta or CD, and recording the next day, I assume doesn't affect their loan lock. If there is a 7-day extension, the first phone call you should make is to the lender, to find out when their rate lock expires. Now, if it's a lender you don't have a relationship with, they honestly may not answer that question to you. They may prefer to give that information directly to the buyer, and then the buyer has to give it to you. But you can see here that Allie was nice enough to give me an estimate for a $500,000 mortgage, that an extending a week would be $625 estimate. So it's still good money, but not catastrophic money. And depending on how the transaction went, you might be able to get that from the seller. If it went well, they didn't ask for any repairs, who knows? It's always worth the ask. Allie, was that good? Are we good moving on from
Yeah, I'm
lender
good. Thank you.
lender perspective?
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
anybody reach out anytime if they have a question, because even if I'm not the loan lender on the side and you can't reach the lender, I'm happy to give my at least general information to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for all your time helping me put some of that stuff together. So if you have a 7-day extension, if someone on the opposite side is causing the 7-day extension, or if you're causing it, you do not amend it on an amend 4T. Because when you amend it on an amend 4T, you actually are adding on 7 days again, unless you check this little box right here, making it 4 days. So if you're utilizing the 7-day window, you do not need to amend it, which drives somebody like me crazy because I really like to see a date, but you absolutely need to clarify it with all parties so everyone's prepared, decide on that utility connect disconnect date. I have also found that out-of-state lenders will ask me for it in writing in an amendment, and I tell them I'm like, in North Carolina, I'm adding 7 more days if I sign this, meaning the other party could add on 7 more days too. So you don't need to use an amendment if you're using the 7 days. And then some examples of buyer delays, loan issues, credit, TRID
Wait,
days, what you
okay,
got?
1 second. It looks like Brian is physically raising his hand.
Oh,
I couldn't. I was trying to click it and I missed.
you're not on my screen. I only have so many people on my screen.
I tried to click it and then my Zoom screen disappeared. It was like panic mode.
Sorry.
One thing I'll say, and if Allie's still on, sometimes, especially if it's an out-of-state lender, they will ask for that. If there's a closing delay of 2 days, they want an amendment anyway. And we know that the lender's the one that gets to make all the rules because they're the ones showing up with all the money on closing day. And if they want it, then you've got to figure out with the parties involved on what everybody's comfortable with. And I would say you can attempt to fight that battle with the lender because we don't need a great relationship when it's all said and done with them. So if we can get them to not require it, but if they do, it kind of is what it is. And so you just got to talk to the parties involved and let them know what the implications of that is. And I'm sorry if you said that and I missed it
No,
because somebody walked in. So anyway.
no, not at all. I just don't be surprised if an out of state lender asks us for an amendment to that date. And I usually say no. And so far I've kind of won. Or just use Ally and we don't have to deal with an out of state lender. So yeah, examples of buyer side delays could be their loan, credit, TRID days. You really have to hope for a lender that you have a relationship with that's keeping you in the process of how the loan's going. Because sometimes they don't. And all of a sudden you realize there's a problem and you're like, why didn't I know about it? It could be that the lender's closing department is behind. Again, Ally is Ally, but sometimes the closing departments are somewhere else. And sometimes those departments run on their own timeline. And if it's the end of a month, if it's a Friday, that could just be causing a little bit of a delay. Domino effect from a sale. So say that, someone else's sale didn't happen on time, so they can't make this purchase on time. Examples of seller delays could be they didn't complete their seller docs correctly, or they didn't overnight them in time. There is a batch of documents that have to be hand signed by the seller, notarized, and delivered or mailed or overnighted to the attorney's office by closing date. And sometimes that doesn't happen. It could be a delayed mortgage payoff. We've had a few lately where sellers have paid their mortgage years ago, but that mortgage carrier neglected to cancel the deed of trust in the deeds. So it looks like a lien on the property. Seller's purchase isn't ready. If it's new construction and they're like, I need 3 more days, so I'm not moving twice. Can I use my 7 days? And again, maybe the sellers just haven't vacated. It could have been logistics. I had a situation where we had snowstorms. The movers were coming from Virginia. They were 2 days behind, caused a 2-day delay. And it stinks. It's inconvenient, but all usually workable. Any thoughts, comments? Anyone want to share their experiences they've had with 7-day extensions? I'll look at the chat too.
I'll just chime in a quick thought, and this applies to so many things, but this too, as the agents, we need to remain calm. We need to understand what the other party's rights are. We need to seek to understand their situation, their circumstances, why this is happening. And then we need to approach our clients in a calm manner. They are not likely to react very calmly, at least initially, but the more information we can provide about why this is happening, what this means, and we need to not be ticked off about it. We have to stay level-headed. So I just throw that in. That applies to so many things, but a delay in closing is a major thing for a lot of people, even if it's actually not a major thing, because it wasn't them making the decision, they get upset about it. And we just have to know that going in and be prepared to walk them back off the ledge.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add two things real quick. One of them was in the material facts class the other day. So if you attended that, then you already heard this. But as with everything, it's all about over communicating. And so having good faith and working towards closing is, like you mentioned on the front end, is an essential part of that 7-day extension. It's not a just because, but there are so many things that can cause that or have the potential to cause it. And so the more proactive we can be in mentioning that, if the buyer changes lender for any reason, right? Like mentioning that to the other side and just saying, hey, we're working towards closing. We shouldn't have any delays, but just so you know, like the more we can be proactive and just keeping that relationship good, the more understanding people will be if, hopefully we don't need to go into that. And hopefully if we do, then it's within those 7 days. But if it goes one more day beyond that, that over communication can mean everything. And that seller saying, well, yeah, we'll wait one more day instead of, everything getting a little contentious. And then this is slightly unrelated, but I just wanted to add a personal example in terms of a way that 7-day extension could be used. I had a luxury client years ago that we negotiated a repair on an HVAC unit, and they had said one thing would be done, and they ended up just using like Freon, and it was a temporary solution. And my buyer client went to inspect the home right before closing, like the day of, and climbed in the attic. And what do you know? It was there was a lot of water in the tray again, and we ended up having someone come out and inspect it, and ended up delaying closing because we needed that repair to actually be done. And so that's a totally valid reason. Like if your repairs aren't done, like you said, the best way you can get some motivation is to not close. It's a lot harder to get people out there if you have removed that. And also just a reminder that this is slightly unrelated, but if there are things that we as agents or them as clients couldn't just simply take a look at and say, yes, that's done, or something like that, for example, your clients have every right to bring a vendor back out and have it re-inspected. They might have to pay for it, but in those type of situations, it's well worth it. So if you can be proactive and not have to do it the day before closing or the day of, that's quite helpful too. That's all.
Love it. Cindy?
Hey, I am also dealing with this right now. I have on the sales side, I have a investor who did a flip and a VA purchase by a VA buyer on the other side, and she literally did not get the well inspected until the week of inspection. So they needed to have it flushed and then retested. And so there was our 7 days, but and then they needed another, and then for the water test to come back, and like just the VA just kept excuses of how they needed to delay it. And so finally, again, we're supposed to close today. I can't wait till this week is over. Yeah, so we're supposed to close today. So now it's 2 weeks late. So we did actually end up negotiating, and I did tell her, I said, look, this was a very delayed inspection, and we negotiated $600 for the week. Because as an investor, like it's all math, right? There's no moving truck or anything involved, but like his costs are like going up. So we did end up getting $600, and I'm pretty sure that the agent is helping her pay that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
So
Good. Good. I mean, there are lots of stories, but it stinks. It can be inconvenient. It's not always meant to be intentional or malicious. And just like Brian said, let's just figure it out. Thanks, guys. Anybody else want to chime in on 7-day extensions? We'll move on to possession. I'm sure Brian will have some input on this one too. So just some options. These are not always ideal. It's really you're going to have to carefully consider this based on your own situation. So buyer possession before closing. Buyer possession could be reasonable if perhaps it was a seller delay. So say the sellers forgot to overnight their docs, the buyers are sitting at the table, the buyers have funded, the lender has funded, and it's just the seller. The seller made a mistake, and maybe the seller's disconnected utilities and they don't want to reconnect them because they should. They'd be responsible for reconnecting utilities if they delayed closing. So in this situation, maybe it would make sense to do a buyer possession. Maybe their moving van's coming the next day, they'll be homeless. Um, then there's examples that might be a little riskier. So if it's the loan delay, if you represent the seller, you'll have to help them through those pros and cons. But if you're not confident the loan is in good standing, that's very risky. This is what the document looks like. You'll notice here that this is for buyer possession. You'll notice that the buyers will take possession on this date. And you'll notice there's no expiration date because the expiration date is closing date. I always like to underline that sellers are entitled to keep a key, buyers get a key, sellers get a key. Everybody gets a key now. Here's where you'd put your rent, your lump sum rent. There is a line here that says if it's the seller's fault, the buyer will pay this additional sum. Use that at your discretion. I've actually never really had used that that part before. I just do the lump sum, if any. Then there's holdover rent. So if the closing date is set and they still don't close, this is the holdover rent. And my recommendation is make that count. Don't put 25 days or I'm sorry, $25, make it count. Personally, I put like $1,500. Like no joke. This is not a joke. Like you can't just keep staying in this property and not close. The utilities would be the buyer's responsibility. And then they need to get renter's insurance and show proof of renter's insurance. So again, there's no expiration date. If this is done near closing day, I don't have clear guidelines on notifying the lender and money outside of closing. It's really going to depend on your lender. I have asked a few attorneys, do lenders like to know about money outside of, or do they want to know about rent money if it happens day before closing? And the lenders I asked said they don't really want to know. The attorney I asked said the lenders don't really want to know. But I don't have clear guidelines. There's no right or wrong. Talk to your managing broker, talk to Allie, talk to Brian, talk to your lender, talk to your attorney. I called the NC Realtor hotline and I asked, can this money be done outside of closing? He told me yes. He recommended follow the lender guidelines. If you do this document, this is a document you need in your firm compliance, renter's insurance, and sellers get a key. Yes, Brian.
Thanks. So a couple quick things. One, so you'll notice in the chat, I put a link to a notice that we've created for seller possession before closing. These are notices you would send to the buyer and or seller, whichever is your client. I don't have one for buyer possession. What I will tell you is that you should avoid buyer possession before closing almost at all costs. I'll give you two quick situations to explain why. Fortunately, there was no buyer possession in these situations, but you could imagine if there was, we have a problem. One, I had a client who the day before closing lost their job. So everything was hunky-dory, ready to go. Let's say that we had done a buyer possession because everything looked good. Everything was ready. No problems, loans approved, everything's good to go. Literally lost his job the day before closing and told his lender, because he thought about maybe I should just not tell the lender close and then I'll figure it out. Okay, well that fortunately we didn't do that. But what if he had been in the property? Now he can't close on it. He's in there. Seller has to get him out. What if he has nowhere to go? He's like, I'll get out eventually, but I don't have anywhere to go. I'm going to stay until I have somewhere to go. You don't want to be involved in that. Second one, which is similar, day before closing, title issue came up. There was a lawsuit that was against the seller that he had been named in, and there was a judgment in a business that he and his son had owned years ago. And that came up. It was tied. The lien had been placed against. I don't know if it's a lien or judgment or whatever, been tied to the property. And so when that property sold, he would need to pay that off. There wasn't enough proceeds to do that. It created an issue. We could not close. The buyers in that case had actually gotten permission from the sellers to go in and do some cleaning and some other stuff. which they had done. They had invested their time and money to do that, and then we didn't close. Now, fortunately, that was it. They weren't moved in yet. But that's a very real thing. Seller possession, you still, you don't love them. You normally want people to just possess the home while they own it. But seller possession, I can swallow. Buyer possession can get can get really ugly if it goes wrong. So we just like to avoid it. And just a quick note, you mentioned about the keys. If you haven't done one of these in a while, but you have done one before, make sure you're reading this form closely. This form has evolved over the years. And the key issue is one of those things that has changed over the years. So you want to make sure you understand what everybody's obligations are regarding access to the property and giving keys.
Thank you. Yep, and then last piece, sellers are allowed to keep a key, but they should not be on the property without permission. So here's a quick, well, it may not be quick, but this was from last year. This was a situation, the realtors sort of do those the realtor.org does the case studies. So my buyer possession, to memorialize the deal, now that my buyers are in the home, I was informed that the heat is out and the buyers are requesting that the sellers pay to fix the heating unit. Who is obligated to make this repair? And if we go back and look at the possession document, it says right here, buyer accepts the property in its current condition. And then even right here, seller shall not be obligated to maintain the property. But there's a but. So the answer is the seller. The seller is responsible for fixing the heat. Although it says that the buyer, the obligation to maintain the property is on the buyer, the seller becomes a landlord with this document. And the landlord is required to maintain a good and safe working order home, and they have to fix things like plumbing, heating, AC, and even the appliances. So therefore the seller would be responsible. So again, sellers could be out of state, buyers are living in their home. It's risky. Buyer possession can be really risky. Any comments? Seller possession after closing. This is what the document looks like. There's a move out date. There's a clear sellers can stay in the property. So again, they've closed. Buyers own it. Sellers have all the money in their pocket, but they're going to live in the property for a while until 5 p.m. on a date or days. This was an offer strategy over COVID, giving the seller possession while those sellers found a new home. If you use this document with your offer, it's located right above the series of boxes where you would mark for lead-based paint or FHA loan. It's right above there. There's a box for seller possession. Buyers are allowed to have a key. Everyone gets a key. There's the rent, and then again, make that holdover rent count. There was a derail story over COVID times. Somebody had put in like $25 a day, and you know what? Those sellers decided, you know what? We haven't found a home. We're just going to stay here and pay the $25 a day. I personally put $1,500, make it count. And then renter's insurance. Did you have something, Kate?
I was just going to read what Allie put in the chat, but it's the top bullet point that you put in there. So carry on. I'll lower.
Oh, yeah. Items of note. The expiration date needs to be clear. And if there's a loan, it needs to be within, really, it should be 59 days just to be safe per lender rules. Those buyers sign a document at closing that says, I will move into this property within 60 days. This is not, this needs to be, this is important. Again, same thing. If this is done near closing day, say if the sellers just request the week of closing, hey, I will give you some rent money if we can just stay here for 3 more weeks while we're waiting to move. I think there's some lenders who would like to know about their rent money and would like it on the CD, and then some may not. So I don't have clear guidelines on that. That will definitely be a conversation to have with the lender and the attorney, and maybe also Ashley and Ryan. Any comments on this? And then as Brian put in the chat, Choice created their own sort of a seller possession expectations that they created. They're in the PDF docs in .loop. And I meant to put screen captures on here and I forgot. So with possession comes renter's insurance. It is required and they need to show proof. The other party's allowed to see that renter's insurance. So I had 2 conversations with Brad Davis. He was super helpful. He also answered 2 of my emails. And I asked him about renter's insurance, just a general cost. It's $15 to $20 per month, minimal. There's no excuse for your client not to get renter's insurance. They can call their current provider. They can call Brad. Also, timely, Brian's video yesterday was getting your insurance quote before making an offer. Watch that video. Also, Brad Davis with Farm Bureau can help you with regular home quotes. All he needs is just the name, date of birth, address, purchase price, and he and his team will respond to you that day or no more than 24 hours. Brian, did you want to comment at all on your video yesterday? No?
I can. I can.
Sure.
Well, just, I mean, quickly, yeah, watch the video. But the idea is, I mean, I always had an insurance quote done for my buyers, but I always did it after closing. And so now with the state of insurance, it makes a lot of sense to get that done ahead of time so that you know what the cost is going to be. And as part of of Brad running that, he's going to see the claims history. Now he can't actually send you the actual clue report. That's yeah, you put it right there, right? He can't actually send the clue report, but he can tell you, like, if there's, there was $100,000 flood claim, water damage claim last year, and you're like, I didn't know, nobody, the agent has not disclosed that to me, haven't told me about that. Now you know about it before making the offer. You can ask the question. So it just makes a lot of sense. And I realize that you may not always, or you might be writing an offer at 8 o'clock at night, and Brad's probably not going to be. He might. I hope he doesn't. I hope he sets boundaries too. He shouldn't get you a quote at 8 o'clock at night on a Friday, but you might be making that offer. But I would still send him the email and say, hey, can you get this? So that hopefully before the contract is executed, you have heard back about that insurance availability, any claims history, that sort of thing. So I would make this part of my standard every time, every buyer, boom, give me a quote. And then the thing is, when you send that quote to the buyer, they're probably just going to go with him. I mean, Farm Bureau typically has the most competitive rates anyway. They cover a lot more than other lender or insurance agents companies do. So, like, if you send that to them and say, "Hey, just got you this quote to help take something off of your plate," buyers are probably like, "Yes, thank you," because they've got 7 million things to get to Allie for their loan.
Thank you. So yeah, I've had a lot of agents ask about clue reports lately. So I asked Brad about it. And just like Brian said, he can't email you the actual clue report, but he can give you an idea of what that claims, what's in the claims history. And there's his information there again. Does anyone have, well, Brian shared a couple of experience with buyer possession, seller possession after closing. I always think this is, I don't know if it's strange, but seller possession, and then the buyer asks, I want to do a final walkthrough. And I'm like, well, you own the home and you have a key, so there really isn't a final walkthrough after seller possession. It's your property. You own it, you have the key. So sometimes they go, oh, wait, and there's little leverage if something has gone awry. I will say 10 years, most of the buyer possession situations I've had, they really go okay. But it's just always good to understand the risk. Brian, any other comments?
No, that's it. During COVID, it became so normal. And then everybody who has cut their teeth in real estate since COVID believes that they're normal. Prior to March of 2020, every real estate agent was told, never, ever, ever touch this with a 10-foot pole. If a client wants to do it, say, go talk to an attorney. And by the way, sign this thing that I told you that you shouldn't do it. But then everybody became very comfortable with it. So I would love to see people be less comfortable with it, but it is a tool. It is available. So when it makes sense, just be educated about it. So thanks for putting this in here.
Thank you. And Every situation is going to be different. So ask questions. So I've noticed a lot of buy sells at the same time. Over COVID, it was a lot of just people selling and getting out and then buying. I've noticed a lot of buy sell at the same time. And POAs and mail OAs. So I just want to touch on those real quick. And we're doing okay on time, I think. With the POA, maybe one partner can't attend closing. This option needs to be first approved by the lender. Don't let your buyers assume that they can just find some POA document online and have that filled out and notarized. Not going to work. Lender has to approve it. Not all the lenders are going to allow it. I had an attorney say that this particular lender said, nope, you getting on a plane, your inability to get on a plane is not a reason for me to allow this POA. I need you both at the table. You can ask the closing attorney to prepare the POA, but the lender is going to want to review it and likely send it back multiple times. They're very particular now about the language that's on the POA. So this requires time. If you find out that your one of your buyers can't attend closing, get on this right away. Ask the lender, am I allowed to use a POA option for the one buyer that can't attend closing? The POA needs to be signed and notarized, and that original needs to be at that closing attorney's office on closing day. And this involves a lot of extra signing. Buyer that is signing. I don't know if any of you have sat through one of these, but that poor buyer is signing their own name. Then they're signing their partner's name by their name, attorney in fact. It's a lot. It's a lot of work. So again, maybe utilizing the 7 days. Can we just bump this out 2 days? Now both people can be at the table and sit there for the hour together. Sometimes that's a reason to use that time. But again, buy sell. I've had a lot of buyers from out of state. One spouse or partner needs to stay up there and handle the sell, and the other one's coming to closing. All workable, just requires a little extra time and communication. And I think my point here is just make sure if you find out they need a POA, the lender needs to approve it and the attorney needs to prepare it in a way that the lender approves. And again, could be a reason we need to extend closing if there's a way for both to be at the table. And then it's funny, I had an agent mention this to me lately and I thought I would put it on here. But there are first-time home buyers in their 20s and 30s that don't know how to sign their name, that don't know how to write a signature. And maybe, you don't want to embarrass them at the table. So I just thought it would be worth mentioning this here. Any comments on POAs?
That's amazing. So we need to add to our buyer consultations, make sure between now and closing, you know how to sign your name. I used to put in my checklist, if you have a favorite pin, bring that. Now you would need to say, make sure you actually know how to use that pin.
Yes.
May I
Yes,
add
you got.
something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of POA, so this is what happened recently to me. So the property is still under contract, so I'm hoping this closes on time. But anyway, so I got this buyer. He was from Hawaii. I mean, the couple was from Hawaii, and they wanted to purchase a property for their daughters living in Raleigh. So they put the house under contract. And when making an offer, I contacted him and he was like, oh, by the way, I cannot sign the OTP for the next 14 hours because I will be on the airplane. And I'm like, oh, okay, got it. And then I thought he would be traveling for business or something and will be back soon in a few days. Turned out, no. He said he and his wife will not be back until July 23rd or something. And it's not domestic, it's international. They said, oh, we're gonna be in Japan until July 23rd. And they wanted to close like July 15th. And they thought everything can be handled by email or e-sign. And at that time, my buyer was thinking about using financing. So of course, nothing can be handled or everything, by email or whatever. turned out to use a POA, since they are already outside of the country, they have to make appointment at US Embassy or consulate
Yes.
and have the document notarized over there, which takes time and money, and it's such a hassle. Luckily, they decided to go all cash purchase, so things got so much easier. But lesson learned, okay, every time, especially summertime, people travel, and you never really know what buyers are actually thinking. Maybe they're thinking, hey, this is 2025, everything can be handled online. But when it comes to closing, it's still old-fashioned way. So every time I have to ask them, like my buyers, hey, are you traveling somewhere, especially internationally? And I have to warn them, don't go. Yeah.
Yes, 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 I know. It's funny the things buyers don't think we need to know, or clients think they just don't think to share that information with us. Cash purchases can be a lot easier. Most of that can be e-signed. There is a new document that some attorneys will allow to be e-signed. It's this affidavit of it's like my data migration. Um, but there still is I think it's okay most of the time for cash purchases to still happen electronically. Now, there was talk of e-closings shortly after COVID. I became an e-notary. I thought this was going to be the new wave. It's just not quite coming to fruition. Lenders and attorneys are struggling with it. So the other option would be mail away. Now, mail away out of the country, whole nother animal. We'll just pretend for today, just mail away within the US. So if your buyers are not able to attend closing in the attorney's office, I just had this happen 2 weeks ago. They were in Pennsylvania, they were selling a home. They really didn't understand they needed to be at the table. So we quickly jumped into, let's do a mail away. The lender needs to know immediately that it's going to be a mail away. The listing agent and the sellers need to be informed that this will fund the day after the closing date, and I'll show you a little calendar of days and how it kind of progresses. And if maybe at that time it's helpful to bump the closing day up a day. So like if it's scheduled on a Friday and now it's become a mail away, might be best to move that closing day to Wednesday or Thursday because of just the logistics of getting those original documents back to the attorney's office causes a delay in recording and a delay in funding for the sellers, especially if you know those sellers need that money quickly for their own purchase. And the attorney needs to know because it involves some extra steps for them preparing the loan package and scheduling a mobile notary. And there are fees. It's going to probably cost your buyer around $300 for the prep and the mobile notary and just overnighting documents back. So if the closing date is 6/26, the loan documents have to be signed on 6/26 with the notary. So that's why when you have you're we're closing on the 26th, can't they just sign everything on the 25th so that they can't? They have to sign on the loan date. That's the loan date that's on the closing disclosure and the Alta statement. So here's the calendar. So on the 25th, the attorney would receive the loan package from the lender. The attorney would schedule a mobile notary. At least Sterling will schedule a mobile notary. I think mobile notaries are becoming the new norm. It used to be where they would overnight all the docs and then the buyer would go and find their own notary and then the buyer would overnight the docs back to the attorney here. I think mobile notaries are becoming the new norm, but they're pricey. Then the attorney would email the loan package to the mobile notary. So we'll go with Pennsylvania. I know it's 11 o'clock, we're right at that hour, but I'll bump through this. We'll pretend they're in Pennsylvania. So the attorney would email that loan package to that mobile notary in Pennsylvania. The mobile notary will hopefully meet the buyers at their home in Pennsylvania. The buyers need to be together. That's the other expectation you have to set, is that when you're scheduling a time, I always have to say, what's the best location for the two of you to be together in order to sign with a notary, ideally before noon, so that the overnight documents will make it back to our North Carolina attorney in time to record that following day. They would sign on this day, the 26th, with the notary, and then the notary will overnight those documents back to the attorney. The loan docs will arrive FedEx to the attorney's office. Kara did mention that FedEx they've been failing. It's been taking an extra day or two. So keep that in mind. Then they'd wait for the lender to fund, wait for the buyer's funds, and then they would record. And then this is the day that the sellers would get their disbursement and would be commission disbursement. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
One quick note on the mobile notaries, or just remote notaries. If you're using the mobile notary that the lender has set up, you're good to go, right? They set it up. But if you think you're just going to go get your own notary to do this, there could be some additional complications. The lender, the title insurance underwriter may want the attorney, not lender, may want the attorney to verify that notary, which will create some additional steps. So just be aware of that. If you are doing a mail away closing as a buyer, you just need to roll with whoever their mobile notary is. And if there's a cost for that, so be it. This is the price you pay for doing a mail away closing.
That's right. Those mobile notaries are vetted by the attorney and the lender. They usually belong to a national notary association. They also pay errors and omissions insurance. I'm a notary. I actually cannot notarize documents for Sterling Law. They have that requirement even for seller docs. Totally respect that. Sellers should keep their homeowner's insurance active until they hear the property is recorded. You know, mail away could be delayed. We're relying on the mail. We're relying on a lot of other pieces to sort of jive. The notary could have forgotten a spot or a signature. Most of the time, the mobile notaries will scan everything back to the attorney before it's dropped in the mail. It's just extra steps for the attorney. It's an expense for your buyers. The overnight, the notary. It can be a perfect option and necessary. Just requires some communication and preparation. But again, another reason why that 7 days could come in handy, if it just happens to be, oh, if we could just push this out 2 days, the buyers can sit together at the table in North Carolina, and it does sort of avoid these steps. Anybody have any questions?
For the sake of the video, since they won't see the chat, I wanted to add something that was put in the chat. It's a little bit unrelated, but relating to signing. Annie asked if a husband and wife are buying and the wife goes out of town all the time, can it just be the husband to sign because 1 to buy, 2 to sell? And so a few things, Allie and I were kind of on the same page, which is if the wife is on the loan, she will need to sign. The husband could be her power of attorney. So obviously that document needs to be approved by the lender. And then on closing day, he'll be signing twice. If she is not needed on the loan, then as long as he is the only one on the contract, then that could be totally fine. Like if she's not needed to qualify. I had an investor client that would do that all the time. He obviously knew his wife had access to the property, but for the sake of getting things signed, and it was just more his passion project to purchase investment property. She didn't really care. Like, it was just him. So just know that that's an option as well. It can be just a partner, but you still want to allow time. And obviously if she's on the loan, then she'd need to be signing in some way, even as a power of attorney. Anyone else have any questions?
There's so much we could dive deeper into, but we want to keep it in an hour and touch on things. So thank you. But I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions.
Thank you so much for doing this today, Kelly. I really appreciate it. As always, you always cover every single base and more. So we appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your personal experience with us and being willing to put this on the calendar. Like we mentioned on the front end, we try to do this on a quarterly basis. So Kelly will continue to keep an eye out for the things that are trending in her world and getting things to closing, and that's what we'll continue to add as topics. But if there are things happening in your contracts or other topics that you would like some clarity on, please feel free to email either myself or Kelly. We'll make sure that those get included in future sessions. Thank you guys for being with us today. If you think of anything, email it our way and we'll get you some answers. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.